A new quarterback for the Broncos, a new coach for the Broncos. How long will it take for it to all come together? That's what we're talking about today on Countdown to Camp. Welcome into the studio. I am Phil Milani alongside Aric DiLalla and Sidney Jones. Guys, a lot of expectations for this Broncos offense. The first time we've really had a lot of excitement about this side of the ball, but we know that the offense side of the ball, it takes some time for this all to come together. Sidney, how long will it take?
Phil, I honestly don't think it's going to take them that long to get going. I mean, we saw the offense, get going in this offseason program with OTAs and mandatory minicamp. They started learning and implementing this new offensive system. I look at the beginning of the season, they play Seattle, they play Houston. I'm not sure if I'm terribly worried about those first couple games, but then they play the 49ers in week 3. Tough defense there. I think if they get through that, we head into week 4, and I feel like that's kind of when we're going to see them kind of start gelling and meshing together. So I think it will take them a couple weeks, but I feel like they should be good to go by week 4.
So you think the schedule helps the Broncos here, starting out of the gate with some opponents like Seattle and Houston. We do know, though, guys, that Nathaniel Hackett, his first year in Green Bay, the Packers 15th in total offense that year. The next year, boom, they jumped to number 1 in the NFL. And Aric, of course, around here, we all know when Peyton Manning came to Denver, it took them until week 6, until the magic in San Diego that night.
Phil, don't scare people. I'm going to hit you with some facts here. Oh, that works for you.
I do enjoy facts.
Those first 5 weeks of Peyton Manning in Denver, 27 points per game. The real issue there was 4 turnovers in week 2, 3 turnovers in week 5, and 3 in week 6 before halftime of that Chargers game, before the Broncos finally got things going. So it wasn't necessarily scoring that was the issue, it was holding onto the ball. So look for that for Russell Wilson to be able to not throw interceptions, for the running backs to hold onto the ball. That can help. And then, like you mentioned, Nathaniel Hackett in Green Bay, that's a good point to look at as well. Packers were held to 10 points the first week against a good Chicago Bears defense. After that, they scored 27 points or more in 5 of their next 7 games. So they actually got things together pretty quickly. They didn't have turnovers in 5 of those first 8 games. So like Sidney mentioned, I think this could actually come together more quickly than people think. And really, you look at that Peyton team, you look at some of the Green Bay struggles maybe at the beginning. Some of those were defensive related. So especially if a Jiro Evro's unit can pick up some of the slack, I think this Broncos team can get off to a strong start offensively.
I should mention that the Packers won 13 games all 3 years that Nathaniel Hackett was there. So they also had a pretty good roster. So important to note there. Sidney, how about Russell Wilson and these guys trying to get together? We know that he already threw in Southern California earlier this offseason, but it looks like they're going to do that again here. At least that's what Wilson said.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, you look at those guys when they came in for the offseason program, the start of OTAs. Russell and his receivers, his tight ends, a lot of the offense, they already had chemistry coming into OTA, so they were really able to focus on the system that Nathaniel Hackett was putting in place. So I think they can only benefit from this, using the summer to get together again and, focus on the system, this new system that they have to learn and really perfect it. So I think it's great.
And building some of that trust. We know Russell Wilson talked about that too, how important that was. Lloyd Cushenberry went down there, took snaps from him, talked about building that trust. Aric, how about the rest of the offensive line, though? Because that seems to be one of the position groups that's really unsettled on this Broncos roster.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, they're going to have to figure out the offensive line sooner rather than later. Some of that is injury related, of course, because Billy Turner has not been available for the offseason program. He's a guy that's kind of favored maybe to start at that right tackle position. I think it's a pretty safe bet that Garrett Bowles is going to slot in at left tackle, Lloyd Cushenberry III at center. But then you don't know, is it Graham Glasgow, is it Dalton Reisner, is it Netani Muti, is it Quinn Miners? Who goes at each of those guard positions? And then, of course, right tackle, where you have Billy Turner, Tom Compton, Calvin Anderson. They're going to need to figure those things out sooner rather than later. I don't worry too much that Billy Turner hasn't been out there because they haven't had pads on. And for offensive linemen, that's what matters. When you get those pads on, get a little bit of time in preseason. That's the other thing, too. How does Nathaniel Hackett handle the preseason? How much time does his offense get? All things to watch.
Yeah, very interested to see how this all comes together. Certainly very excited for the start of camp because we saw glimpses of it during the offseason program. But once these pads come on, we're really going to be able to see what are we talking about. And maybe some more of those moon balls. Maybe we see the running game get going. We can really get a good look at Javonte Williams. This offensive side of the ball is loaded for the Broncos, so I think it's just a matter of when, not if, it all comes together, and this is a pretty dynamic unit. All right, next week we will be talking about who will lead the Broncos in interceptions. Justin Simmons or Pat Surtain, the second, maybe another guy. We'll talk about that on our next episode of Countdown to Camp. Until then, for Aric DiLalla and Sidney Jones, I'm Phil Milani.